I'd like to thank you all for coming to the very first of the summer series behind the scenes lectures that they have going on for the next several Sundays. My name is Cynthia Kaufmann. I'm the Chief of Horticulture here, and I have been fortunate enough to spend my entire career here at the gallery, so over 30 years now, I have to admit. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Our campus runs from 3rd Street to 9th Street. Our footprint covers basically 5 acres of grass, about 5.5 acres of heavily planted beds, and 7 acres of hardscape. And when you come up to the gallery, your impression of the gallery is going to be my responsibility. Are the sidewalks clean? Is the trash emptied? Are the beds nice and presentable? And in order to do this, you'll see my staff here. We have a staff of 16 full-time employees. We have about 12 volunteers and contractors that work here 365 days out of the year to make everything look flawless. So I thought what we would do is start at the West Building where it all started. Back in 1941, on March 17th, when the gallery opened, horticulture was part of the design. Pope's design of the building had the garden courts on either end of the West Building. In the east and west end of the main floor were designed with plants and a fountain for your relaxation, for your enjoyment, to ponder the art that you've seen, or to just relax while you're going through the many galleries. Here's a really early photo of the fountain in the East Court before the gallery opened. And I always like going back to some of these old photos of how plants were brought inside the building. And here early on, a group of gardeners bringing a large palm in. The west and east garden courts have typically had fishtail palms adorning the quadrants to give you that nice big lush foliage look. You have to remember that we are dealing with conditions that plant materials usually don't like. We have low light, we have low humidity, and so we manipulate the areas in order to turn it into something like this, a nice green lush area for you all to enjoy. The fountain displays, everything comes from our greenhouses that we have on site. You'll see a couple pictures later on, and we typically will just be going through the greenhouses and selecting seasonal plants to go along with the time of year. Our standard forsythia and the clivia, the kaffir lilies, are always a big hit in the springtime. The clivia, we probably have about 30 plants, and they are so fantastic just because of the color. You can spot it a mile away up there. Here's just another display of some foliage. We typically take a trip down to Florida once a year and buy a tractor trailer load of plants so that we can have this rotation going year round. Sometimes I'm selecting plants for special events. Sometimes I'm selecting plants just for the courts themselves. We have 4 places in the gallery that have plants all year round in the West Building, East Building, that we have to supply plants every week. And so in order to do that, we need to have a nice rotation. And so having a tractor trailer show up is the best way to do that. Here we have a really nice picture with our weeping lantana and the calamandan oranges. This is an example of how we will take a plant and reuse it over and over and over. The calamandans were purchased for an exhibit, and we've had them for maybe 10 years now. And so we can take them out to the greenhouse and let them have a little rest from being inside and let them fruit again, and then you all get to enjoy them. Here's just another example with some crab apples and some foliage and begonia plants. Sometimes we like to say we're put something a little faux in. So this is cut cherry blossoms, and We make it look like it is a bush, but when it really is just cut material for something special. And there's a nice traditional holiday setup. The garden cafe is another area where we have plant material, and when I was reviewing this, I realized I only put one slide in here, the garden cafe, but we don't neglect the garden cafe. Here you can see some lilies and some, I think, some salix in the bottom there. And then the Shadar, which is the Cascade Fountain area, also has plant material year-round. And so here you can see a nice combination of some summer flowering hibiscus and black-eyed Susans. This is some plumbago. A lot of plant material that we do grow is going to be tropical, just so that it will tolerate the space. And so something like this, we have to have in the greenhouse. We can't leave it outside in the wintertime. There's a nice shot with some poinsettias. And here are some more of the kaffir lilies and some yellow tulips. Nice spring. So then I'm going to talk to you about the Ames Haskell Azalea collection. This collection of plants was given to us for the 50th anniversary. So back in '91 was the first official year that we displayed it. We have typically always shown this the month of March, and to commemorate the opening of the West Building. And the azaleas are a bunch of Kurumi azaleas that were brought over by an explorer in the early 1900s. And so for the last 26 years, we have been displaying this collection. We house the collection out in a greenhouse in Frederick, Maryland. We ran out of space to have it here because we have so many things that we support and needed the space of our greenhouses on site. So we had to keep moving north in order to afford a place. So that's how we ended up there. It's quite a ride, but you can see here, there's a big box truck, like right there. This is our loading dock down in the basement of the West Building, and we bring the plants in the truck, unload them here, and then we take them upstairs on carts through a very nice large elevator, and then we will arrange them in the rotunda. There's a really nice variety of color, of size of flowers, of textures, and if you haven't seen the collection, it's really worth coming back in March to see it. This one is a bobink. This is a apple blossom. And then a salmon supreme. And then here you can see what it looks like when we have all of them together. Over the years, a collection can change. Plants grow, plants die. We try to do our best to take cuttings of the collection so that we can keep it going, or find new Kurumi azaleas that we can add to the collection just to replace those that have deteriorated. And while we're in the rotunda, I'll talk to you about the Folger display. So in the early 90s, we had really elaborate parties going on here. The displays were just phenomenal. And we had some donors that just felt it wasn't fair for them to be the only ones to see these fabulous displays. And Lee and Juliet Folger gave us an endowment so that we could have a display in the rotunda from November 15th to April 15th. And this is the first display we do, which starts in November. And we usually do a fall color theme for the last 2 weeks. And here you can see some orange and yellow and some nice big foliage plants that we grow. We work more than a year in advance to select what plant materials we want and to arrange with growers to have the plants for us when we need them. as you can imagine, a lot of things can happen in a year's time. So we usually try to have a nice backup plan just in case, because things can happen. Crops can fail and deliveries can fail, and we've been there and we've done it, and you just keep moving on. In December, we move into the holiday display, and for those of you who have been around in December, you'll know that we always have some really large Christmas trees adorning the space and then our display. And in this space, we stay fairly traditional with the look of the red and the white and the evergreens. I have branched out a little bit and tried some new colors in some different spaces. And you can always come back December 1st. We usually have everything set up for Christmas, so you can come and see the different colors. I'm not going to tell you what I've ordered yet, so maybe you can come back and see what we have. Into January, we usually typically incorporate some blue or orange. We have this funny thing, my deputy, Julie Goodman, and I have been making these displays for a long time, and she and I had decided that in January it's really cold and you feel a little blue, so we always add a little blue into this display. And then in February, I think everybody should feel the love, and we usually go with the red and pink and white for the season of Valentine's. I'm a pink lady. That's pretty much my color, and even I get a little tired of the pink, so we try not to go too overboard on that. And then Easter, we always have an Easter display that usually finishes up depending on when Easter falls. So either before or after Easter, depending on the timing, we might also end with, here's another shot of a nice Easter look of what we call our spring medley. So here we have some dogwood and that really nice yellow standard for Cynthia. And then, you know, it's not a good close-up for you, but we really do have a mix of every bulb and texture and color you can imagine for a spring garden. The display usually has like 350 plants to 450 plants, depending on what we've selected to use. So we have to really be ready to substitute something if we do have a crop failure. Along with the rotunda, Mr. Folger really wanted us to have plant material in the niches. And the red roses that are there, we did and coincide with the February display, and the week of Valentine's, we had those in every niche. There's over 100 roses in each arrangement. So they'll last about 5 to 6 days for everybody to enjoy. And then throughout the season, we will have a different display in there. It might just be a single plant, or it could be something like this. This complemented the fall display in November. And then here you can see where we have coordinated the Australian tree ferns in the niche and in the display, so it just all comes together. So this brings us to the greenhouses. The greenhouses the first one was built in 1954, and it really is the mainstay of what we do here. We support hundreds of special events, from a dinner for a lunch for 2 to dinner for 1,000, having screens, having plants for all the displays throughout the West Building, depending where it is. And so this really keeps us going. And this is the oldest greenhouse right here. It was a Lord and Burnham greenhouse, which was really the greenhouse to build back then. They're no longer in business, but I can tell you that this greenhouse has withstood a lot of time. And it's getting very tired right now, and we're hoping that in the future we can get funding to replace the greenhouses so that we can continue the program that we have built it into over the many years. There's one of the gardeners cleaning plants. We have a 0 bug policy inside the building. You can understand why because of the artwork. And I have to say that we are pretty fortunate that bugs that like plant material do not like artwork. Which is a good thing for me. But even so, we really make sure that everything is clean. If we see anything, it's out of the building right away. We always say we're almost like Disney, just plants on wheels, so that if we have something that needs to be replaced, we just take it right out and put in a new plant. So as you can imagine, we do have to spray pesticides in order to accomplish this. We're lucky enough that we keep things clean enough that we very rarely have to use anything strong, and we use a lot of safer soaps and safer oils in order to accomplish our goal here. Here's a nice picture of the guys. We use these little golf carts to take everything in and out of the building. So here they are loading up these rather large ficus, and then you can see what it looks like in the niche in the rotunda. The other endowment fund that we have is from Linda and George Kaufmann. And again, back in the 90s, when her and her husband were attending the rather large parties, she thought that wouldn't it be really nice to have arrangements as you come in the building, to have some kind of flower to greet you as you walked in the door. And so this is a few examples of what we've done over the years to bring a smile to your face as you walk in the door. I have to say it's really quite an honor when you're in my position and you walk around the gallery and you see people looking at what you do and it makes them happy, it makes you happy too. All colors, all the seasons. There we are with the 2 of them on a desk getting ready for an event. A really nice fall combination. Oh, and here you can see the white flowers in there are abelia, and we grow abelia out on the plaza and use it. I mean, you can cut that stuff and never know that you've cut it. So we use it a lot in flower arrangements, and it's nice that we can just go outside and do that. Here's a nice 4th of July arrangement. And so coming over to the East Building now, the East Building opened in 1978, and it too, plant material was part of the mission from the very beginning with I.M. Pei's design of our ficus trees in the atrium. As you can imagine, again, here we are in an open space that seems really bright, and none of the light that's coming in the building is for the trees. It's all screened off so that the bad rays are not coming in the building. So we have grow lights in the ceiling, and if you go out into the atrium, you can look up and see them, otherwise you would never notice them. And that keeps these trees going. I don't have an example of it, but the trees turn. And so we can also get in there and turn them so that they're always moving, just like the light would move during, for an outdoor tree. And a lot of questions I get about the trees is how often do you have to change them? And, we'd like to say every 15 to 20 years. So I thought you would like to see an example of us bringing these large trees from Florida. And this is all done by my division. And so they strap them up in these forklifts and lift them up into the planter, put it right in there, and then there's a nice happy tree. So this is one of our gardeners, and he's spraying down the tree. We spray them down once a week for a couple of reasons. One, it gives it a little bit more humidity right inside its canopy, and it also helps with the dust. If you can imagine, this place is really dusty, and with all the people coming and going and the fibers of your clothes, you'd be amazed the dust balls that get made around here. And so the washing of the trees really helps with keeping them clean. And there's a nice holiday shot. The east building was also has we have 3 terraces now, but originally 2 terraces were designed with plant material. The last terrace that was designed is one that's open to the public, and these that I'm going to show you are on the employee side. And these were original crab apples that were up there, and it was not a good choice of a plant. We really fought the fire blight with them, and so they decided to change them. And I always think this is a great shot because it's a flying tree in DC. Really large cranes were used to do a lot of roof work, and so at the end of the project we were able to utilize the crane and get the trees up onto the roof. We replaced them with Styrex japonica or Japanese snowbell, and they seem to be very happy in their spot, and you can see that they definitely have a beautiful view of the Capitol. And then the other terrace, we put crepe myrtle on. This is one perk of working at the gallery. This is where employees can go to have lunch and coffee in the morning. And you have a fabulous view and a nice plant to sit under. Here's another view with some pretty roses. And then along the left side, we have some espaliered magnolia. And I think this is a great shot too. You get to see the Capitol and the Smithsonian, and it's a great place to be in the morning. I used to say, well, I'll go water the terraces because you get a nice quiet time up there by yourself. And they're not irrigated, so we have to water the trees every other day in the summertime. So it's quite a labor of love up there to keep everything going. So this is probably the most photographed spot, I think, at the gallery right now, our newest terrace. And I went down to Georgia to pick out the fringe trees that are in the circular planters that match the circular planters that are in the atrium. And that is a Chionanthus retusus. And then we had picked the moonfire maple to go in the planter that is right at the skylights. And so when you leave here and go upstairs, if you look up out the skylights, you can see the maples. Sometimes you wouldn't know to even look up there, but you can see them up there if you haven't been up there. It's a nice view as well. He gets a lot of publicity. We're moving right along. Here we have our fountain gardens that were also of original design, and they have definitely changed and grown over the years. As you can imagine, that those overcupped oaks that are up there are some of the largest oaks around the area. And when they were planted, they were just a small little 5-inch tree. And now they're just a massive tree that's created a lot of shade. So for 75 years growing and changing the garden and changing the space, we have had to do the same thing. The large magnolias have stayed. We have had some damage with some snow on the magnolias through the winter, and we just recently, in the last couple of years, changed one of the original magnolias. But other than that, the bottom garden is just like a garden you have at home. It's going to grow, it's going to change. We're going to like something, we're going to not like something, and make it work so that it always looks presentable. We have some reblooming iris up there. If you don't have any and you like iris, this is the one to get. It'll flower for you in the spring and in the fall. And we've had iris flowering up till Christmas when we have had some mild temperatures. And there's some really pretty hydrangeas and our topiary azaleas that line the pathway. And then it always brings you to the wisteria, something that I usually get phone calls asking, is it flowering? Is it flowering? Can I come see it? And I have to say that we're the lucky ones here because back behind the moat walls by the greenhouse, we are always the first one to see it flower because it's rather warm back there. So I can always gauge how long it's going to be by how much longer it is from the inside of the wall. And there's a nice shot of it along there. Would you guess that we had arborists on staff? So we are in charge of all plant material, which means that we are also in charge of the health and well-being of our mature trees and aging trees on our campus. This is just an example of going to a nursery, choosing a cherry tree that had to be replaced at the East Building. I thought you'd like to see this. This is really fun to watch when they bring one of these big spades in to plant a tree. And it's amazing how fast they can plant a tree using that equipment. Currently, the landscape is a bit different from the picture that you just saw. When we did all the construction around the East Building, it was decided to go back to the landscape plan of Dan Kiley from the very beginning when the gallery opened. And so that plan was a very plain grass and trees, and that was it. And so this is a current picture from this past spring of what it looks like now. We still have a construction fence down at 3rd Street, but besides that, everything is back to the way it was. And here we come to the sculpture garden. So when I was younger working here, I would have tourists ask me where the sculpture garden was. And I'd say, well, there isn't one. But it was on the map in the 1960s as having a sculpture garden in this space. And so we were fortunate enough to work with the Park Service to be deeded the land in the early 90s. And part of the agreement was that we would keep the double ring of lindens and the pavilion that was in the back. And so then it began. Ripping up all the concrete that was there and the pathways and bringing in really large plant material. So when the construction was going on, our group was not part of that. There were contractors and construction groups taking care of all of the work, but I worked in the greenhouses right across the street at that time. And I was like a kid in the candy store watching these trees come in, one tree on a tractor trailer at a time. It was unbelievable for me to see this. And all the trees that were brought in were of a large caliper so that when this garden would open, it would look like it had been there for a long time. And so this was not long after it opened up in the wintertime, and you can see all of those large cedars, Atlas cedars, and see how it really looked like a real garden right away. It was too bad that Mr. Mellon didn't get to see the opening. He died just months before the opening of this garden, but the idea that he could have walked through here and seen a garden that looked like it had been on the map for a long time would have been really nice. We take care of every aspect of this garden. 6.1 acres is the overall footprint. We take care of the sod, irrigation, cleaning, anything you can name. And here's an example of a piece going into the garden. This is the Roxy pane, the large tree, and here it is, all the sod showing up to put down the sod to finish it off. Working with Roxy was very interesting. He was here during the construction of the tree, and living artists obviously have requests. And so his request was that we did not have flowering material behind the tree. And so it is very green on that corner of the gallery, of the garden, and you'll see that. More sod work. Something to also consider what we do is replace a lot of sod because of people. You'll see some great people shots here in a minute. The heat of the sidewalks really is hard on the grass. It heats it up and burns it up. And so we replace a lot of sod. There's a great shot up in a lift looking down at the eraser. Here's some nice spring color with the magnolias that always open up so early. And the spider. So I wanted to show you this because this is just an example of how we had to adapt to a situation. When the garden was designed, it did not have one piece of artwork in mind. They designed the garden with some rolling, let's say, rooms to put things, but artwork had not been chosen when the design was finally put together. And so when this spider was put in this spot, it had grass all underneath it. And as you can imagine, it almost looks like a jungle gym. So you could see people swinging from this thing all the time, and it's really fragile, so we had to close the whole area off. So when you see some pieces that are definitely closed off, there's usually a reason why. And here's some great fall color. And there's another one with the eraser, which brings us to the people. So if you've been here on a Friday night from the end of May to the beginning of September, we have jazz in the garden. And there can be 8,000 to 15,000 people go through here on a Friday night. And as you can guess, grass is really hard to grow. Here are just a lot of people. You end up with compaction, you end up with dead grass, you end up with sangria everywhere. This is another thing that we work on every year after the season, is revamping all of our sod so that it can look nice. The Mellon Fountain was another piece of land that we have acquired over the last year and a half. This was donated to us by the Park Service so that we could fix it up. This fountain was dedicated in the early 50s, and the Park Service ran it, and then they ran out of money to keep it up. And so Richard King Mellon Foundation gave money to the gallery to fix it, and then the gallery worked on acquiring the land so that if we fixed it, we could maintain it and keep it nice. And so for those of you all who have been in town, you'll know that there's been a lot of construction around it lately, and they took the fountain completely apart. Last year, we worked on revamping it for the opening of the 75th anniversary, which meant planting about 30,000 mondo plant for a nice green grass-looking cover and a few new trees. And this past fall, they shut it down again to fix the fountain. What had happened over time was the concrete under the bronze form had deteriorated. And so they took took everything down to the ground and started over. And it was my understanding they were testing water in it this past weekend. So we're getting close. I think a couple more weeks and you'll be able to see this fountain in its full glory. There's just a nice another picture. Snow. To us, snow is a four-letter word. I don't know how you feel about snow, but I think I'm ready to move to Florida sometimes. So this is us after one of the snow paloozas that we had in the last several years. And not only do we sleep here and stay here for days when something like this happens, I think we're all just really hoping for a nice hot meal when we can finally get home. It's our job to make sure that the sidewalks are safe for you and that when you come, it's going to be okay. You know, we always hope for a nice warm sun after snow like that just to clear off the sidewalks. And in some of these cases, you know, there is so much snow that it makes it really difficult to get around DC. The mall steps has over half an acre of granite and marble. And so you can imagine how heavy that snow is to get it down the steps. like this last winter was a perfect winter. We can always hope that we don't get a lot of snow. I know when my kids were little and they wanted the snow so bad so they wouldn't have to go to school, and I'd just be, oh, please, no snow. And there's a great shot. So we work with conservation also to identify plant material within the paintings. A lot of times there might be a book that's being written or maybe some research that they'd still like to continue. You're going to find in artwork, as many of you will know, that a lot of plant material is made up. You can't identify it. It's got a flower and a leaf that don't belong together because it looks much better in a painting that way. And we work with object conservation, just like the spider. The stacked chairs had the same problem. The grass went right to the fence behind this piece when they put it in. And so it looks like a ladder. It looks like you should climb it, and everybody wanted to climb it. It was just as unstable as the spider, and so we rerouted the bed so that we would have stuff in front of it, but yet you could still enjoy it and see it. And I have to say, I don't see people trying to climb this. And here's a nice example of one of our gardeners, Willie, rerouting irrigation. So whenever a new piece or a piece gets changed in the garden, we have to go through and change all the irrigation. The spray of the water will leave permanent marks on the artwork. So obviously we can't have that. So we have to go in and we can work with a piece like this and have all the spray heads for the grass spray out from the piece of art so we don't have that problem. We also do tours and workshops. We have a lot of staff members that like to come out to the greenhouses and have tours if you're a new employee or if you're a special guest, or in this case, we were working with our volunteer consortium of the greater Washington area where we hosted an event here, and the members are volunteers at different gardens. We're here to learn about what we do here. That's Jeff Nagel. He's our sculpture garden manager there talking to the group. And yours truly talking to a group in the greenhouse. And this is Julie Goodman and myself doing a flower demonstration. We had an after-hours event where we were asked to show people how to make arrangements. So we thought what we should do is go to the grocery store and buy bouquets of flowers that you would buy and make a flower arrangement with this group. And we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of people. Everybody took theirs home, and I have to say nobody left theirs behind, so they must have been happy with it. And then I'd like to talk about exhibitions. So since a very early on time, plant material has been used inside the gallery with exhibitions. We are a very unique museum in that you are going to see plant material throughout the place. Not a lot of museums are like us. We have learned to adapt to it. It's kind of the norm here that we have plants on the corners and to make a place look softer or enhance a spot. This was a show right after I started here, this Nasher collection. It was sculpture, outdoor sculpture that was on every floor of the East Building. And since it should have been outdoors, they wanted it to look like it was in a garden. So every floor of the East Building was had heavily planted beds with the sculpture in it. This is another great example, if you've been around the gallery a long time, of the Japanese show that we had years ago of creating a Japanese garden. They incorporated the ficus trees in the main atrium. They had a tea house, and you could tour the house and the little garden out there. And this open area, which is now a really large piece of art, was an English garden from the treasure houses of Britain in the later 80s, I believe. And then it was switched over to this Japanese garden, which it stayed a Japanese garden for a very long time. And probably one of my very favorite exhibits that we worked on was Pompeii. And this exhibit created a house. It was a replica of a house that was found. And we had this fresco hanging on the wall next to a spot where we were going to create an indoor garden. And so we studied this painting and brought plant material out of it. You can see over here we have some oranges, and we used Mediterranean herbs. Anything we could find that was associated with that fresco, we brought into this painting, or into this little garden. And the strawberry trees, the arbutus right here, we had them shipped from California so that we could really bring this show together, because that's one plant that we clearly could see in that fresco. And then there's an overall view. That red room in the back was a dining room, and then the planting area would have been an open ceilinged garden space inside this house. So it really tried to make it as realistic as possible. And one of the last things that I have to talk to you today is about special events. This is something that takes quite a bit of our time. We work with the special events groups to put together beautiful flowers, as I said earlier, from a lunch to 2 to a dinner for 1,000. We work with outside florists. Depending on how big the event is, we only have so much room to create things. So I thought I would walk you through the steps of what we do in order to put a special event together. So our first thing is going to be choosing the linen with the special events group. This is for Basile, and that pretty blue aqua was picked, and then they create maps to tell us where they want everything. For this event, we had 60 cafe arrangements to make. And so we'll go into the exhibit and we'll study the artwork, and you'll see here that there's geraniums and hydrangeas and roses and lilies, and we'll look at the palette, we'll look at the linen that has been chosen, and then create buffet arrangements and cafe arrangements from this. So here's an example of what we did. In this painting, you have the white calla. We had already decided we were going to be using a salmon color. And although it looks red, it really was a little bit more salmon, the calla in the clay pot. So we mimicked the clay pots that are in the painting. And there's a lot of clay pots painted throughout Basile's paintings, just to bring it all together. And here's an example. You can see the amaranth hanging in his painting here. I really wanted to get some of the trumpet vine, but I couldn't find it anywhere to purchase it. So we stuck with the amaranth in our nice big urn and tried to create and give you the same feel of the exhibit that the event is for. And the geraniums in the clay pots as well. It's using real plants is a lot more economical than using cut flowers. And in this case, we had a smaller budget, so we were able to really, I think, bring it all together in the long run. We bring plants from the greenhouses to create screens. So depending on the group and where it is, we can close off a space, or in this case, because there were so many people coming, when they come in, they would be kind of filtered into one area to start the event. So this is, I say I have a lot of favorites. I think I really do have a lot of favorites. This is from Della Robbia, which recently closed a few weeks ago, and here is an example of what we did to create a flower that would really be associated with the artwork. We took her headdress and studied it, and she had pears and lemons and cucumbers and the little blue flowers and grapes, and we created our version of that in a flower arrangement. I think this hit it home, right, with that combination. And here are just a few more examples of cafe arrangements that we've done. Something pretty and bright. Work with the artwork. See what season it is. Obviously, here we have a holiday event going on. This was a tropical theme. It's always fun when you can make 60 arrangements that don't have to be identical. The lunches and dinners, we work with the florist who usually are doing the arrangements for the tables, so that our display will match their color theme. We never have to be exact, because I don't think we need to be exact, but we really work so that when people come in, it really complements each other. And in this case, the oranges were duplicated in the fountain with our hydrangeas that we had purchased for this display. Here's another one that was used a lot of purple, and so we had some really nice purple delphinium, and then their arrangements were more on the pink side, but it all just came together so nicely. This was the first Mellon dinner that I had worked at. This is in the early 90s with the topiaries and the roses and the lilacs. It was also in the month of March, I'm sure commemorating the opening of the gallery back then with the really pretty peach color. And in the background, you see these screens. They were lemon leaf screens. Somebody stuffed lemon leaves in all of those screens. It was a lot of work. Contractors would come and do this work. Today, we wouldn't have enough money to create something like this, but it is kind of fun to look at the past and see where we've evolved to. This was the 75th annual dinner last March 17th. I have to say, I think this was the most elegant display that the gallery has seen yet. You can see the large curtain screens that they constructed to hang in the 4 quadrants of the rotunda, and then an all-white theme on these kind of mirrored-y tables was really stunning. And I think I have a little bit closer shot of here we go. You can see in that arrangement, we created those rose arrangements that we had in the niches, and we had peacock feathers in here. I had done some study on flowers from the 40s, and they tend to use some feathers, and so I took it to my level of what I wanted. And I found some white peacock feathers and then ostrich feathers that we had at the entrance arrangement. So you can see orchids and callas and hydrangeas and roses, just a lovely mix to really bring it together. And I hope I haven't talked too fast, but I just want to thank you so much for coming and maybe learning something new, a little aspect of horticulture of what we do here at the gallery.